Have you ever looked at someone's financial situation and thought, why can't they just get out of that hole? It can look like a series of bad choices from the outside, but the reality is so much more complicated. Today, we are going to pull back the curtain on the financial patterns that literally trap people in a vicious cycle.
Okay, let's just stop and think about that for a second. It's expensive to be poor. That sounds totally backwards, right? How can it cost more to have less money? Well, this single, counterintuitive idea is the absolute key to understanding this whole mess. Let's dive in.
You know, for the longest time, the whole conversation about poverty was centered on things like bad habits or poor choices. But what if we've been looking at this completely wrong? What if those so-called habits aren't the cause of the problem, but are actually a symptom of it? What if they're just rational reactions to living under constant, crushing pressure?
So, right off the bat, let's shift our perspective away from blaming the individual. This isn't about willpower or someone not being smart enough. It's about understanding an environment where the game is rigged, the choices are limited, and the system itself can work against you.
So where does this downward spiral actually start? Well, it all begins with the very first domino. And for millions of people, that first domino is simply the lack of any kind of financial cushion. No safety net at all.
This right here is the foundation of the trap. When every single dollar you earn is already spoken for rent, for food, for bills, there is absolutely zero margin for error. Your entire financial life becomes this incredibly fragile thing, just waiting for the slightest push to completely fall apart.
And that push, it doesn't have to be some huge, life-altering catastrophe. We're not talking about a natural disaster. Research shows that for so many people, not having a tiny cushion of just a few $100, like $500, is the difference between an inconvenience and a full-blown financial crisis. And think about how normal these things are. A tire blows out on your way to a job you can't afford to miss. A kid gets sick and you have a surprise doctor's bill. Or you have to take an unpaid day off work to deal with a family emergency. For someone with savings, these are just annoyances. But without a buffer, they are absolute emergencies that demand an immediate and usually very expensive fix. So a crisis hits. You've got no cash. What do? You're forced to look for help, for some kind of immediate relief. The problem is, these so-called solutions come with a price tag that is just astronomically high. They're designed to keep you in the trap, not help you climb out. We're talking about things like payday loans or car title loans. And these things can have interest rates that soar past 300% a year. No, that is not a typo. Let me say it again, 300%. It's almost unbelievable.
So what in the world does that actually mean? Well, APR is basically the price you pay to borrow money for a year. A 300% APR means if you borrowed, say, $1,000 and took a year to pay it back, you'd pay $3,000 in interest alone on top of the original $1,000. It's a mathematical trap you can't win.
And this is what we call the debt treadmill. It's a perfect metaphor. Every payment you desperately make barely touches the original amount you borrowed. The principal. It just gets eaten up by that massive interest. So you're running and running as fast as you can, but you're not going anywhere, all while your future paychecks are being drained away.
And it's not just the big loans. This cycle gets you with the death by 1,000 cuts. It's his hidden convenience tax. See, when you're short on cash and time, you can't afford to buy toilet paper in bulk for 50 cents a roll. Instead, you're forced to buy one roll at a time from the corner store for $2. You end up paying way more for the exact same stuff, just because you're poor.
So here it is. This is the loop. You start with no emergency fund. Then, bam, an unexpected crisis hits. That forces you into high-cost debt just to survive. The payments on that debt then suck up any extra money from your future income, which means you still can't build an emergency fund. And you're right back at square one, just waiting for the next thing to go wrong. It just feeds itself over and over again.
But, you know, the numbers and the mechanics of debt, that's really only half of the picture. There is this huge, invisible mental weight that comes with this kind of constant financial stress. And that exhaustion makes it nearly impossible to find the brainpower you need to plan your way out.
There's a scientific name for this. It's called cognitive load. Think of your brain like a computer with a limited amount of processing power. When all of that power is being used just to juggle bills and worry about where your next meal is coming from, there's literally no bandwidth left for long-term strategic thinking. It's not that you don't want to plan for the future, it's that your brain is just too tired from trying to survive today.
This mental overload leads to behaviors that might seem totally irrational from the outside, but they're actually survival strategies. You see things like financial blindness, where it's so stressful to even look at a bill that you just don't. Or social survival spending, where you buy something to feel normal and avoid the shame of being poor. And it creates a heavy present bias, where your brain is hardwired to prioritize getting through right now over anything else.
Okay, so this cycle is incredibly powerful. But, and this is a big but, it is not unbreakable. The key is not to try and fix everything all at once. That's just overwhelming. The secret is to build tiny, manageable systems that can start to disrupt the loop and give you a little bit of momentum.
Look, the most damaging part of this whole thing isn't one bad loan. It's the belief that takes root in your mind that says, I am just not capable of saving money. So the real first step is to prove that voice wrong, even if it's just in a tiny way. Breaking that psychological seal, that's the real win. It's all about matching a very small, doable action to a very specific problem. If the issue is having no buffer, your goal isn't to save $1,000, it's to save your first 100. If you're stuck on that debt treadmill, just focus on paying $5 more than the minimum payment. And if your money just seems to vanish, don't build a massive budget. Just track what you spend for 1 month to see what's happening.
At the end of the day, breaking this cycle boils down to one fundamental change in mindset. It's about moving from being reactive, always wondering, where did my money go, to being proactive, where you are the one who tells your money where to go, no matter how little you have to start with.
So I'm going to leave you with this question. This isn't about having a grand plan tomorrow. It's about finding that one tiny, achievable first domino you can push over. So ask yourself, what is the smallest possible system you could build today to start taking back control?